Hello, everyone, and welcome to the August 28th analytics section meeting. Fairly light agenda. Please feel free to add anything if there's something you'd like to discuss or show off in our little show and tell section. But the one topic that I wanted to really talk about is potential solutions for how we could better deal with events that are missing columns or just not basically in the past couple of weeks and today as well, or over the weekend perhaps, we've had some events come in that are, I guess, missing columns. And I think as ClickHouse is trying to parse it, it just seems well, ClickHouse is saying it's missing tabs and because it's the events are tab separated values, but it seems like we might be missing values as well. On one hand, we should be able to better handle these when we don't use the Kafka engine in the in-cluster ClickHouse because ClickHouse Cloud doesn't support that. But on the other hand, that's still going to be a concern for self-managed installations for the cluster and things like that. So I was curious if we had any ideas about how we could potentially better handle these. There is an issue that Basti, who's not on the call, linked to for a related issue for analytics instrumentation group to look at this. So he invites any input there. And then Ankit, you had a point here as well. Would you like to vocalize that?
Yeah, sure. So I have debugged the issue, that particular issue where like it got failed, and it seems like the STM it is a timestamp and it is not being passed in the payload, and that is the reason. Like in the ClickHouse, like for Snowplow events, while creating a table, we gave as a schema as a date time, and it is not getting that. So that's why it's failing. So there are three possible solutions to that. We accept the event and add the current timestamp if it's not present. If it's we can discard the event in the enrichment process as only. Third option is like we update the schema where we accept the nulls for the Snowplow events table. But we also might to check for all the events which are present, like cause like we only know right now like the STM has a issue, but it can be other events as well.
Right. I guess it speaks to more of how do they want to handle fields in general that like null values and all that kind of thing. Because we can address, like you said, we can address it for STM, but if someone else leaves out another column where the schema changes, then this issue could be reproduced again, right? So
yeah.
It's interesting how a missing field is causing a parsing issue though, because I don't know if I'm not clear yet. I still haven't looked at the ClickHouse error more in depth, but I'm curious how that's like. Is that trying to match again? It's not even able to parse it correctly because I was going to say, is there an issue between the columns to insert and like the missing field? But if it's an optional field as well, then yeah, that wouldn't make sense. Yeah. So you're saying that we could potentially deal with like fields that come in that are missing in the enrichment process?
Yeah, with the JavaScript custom enricher, like we can add that or discard it. So like what do you think about like should we discard if it doesn't have STM, or like should we try it with some placeholder value there?
Well, is it specific to the, because a lot of these events have come from someone trying to just send curl events, so it's not exclusive to like to provide more context. They weren't using an SDK, so they knew that we could accept snowplow events. And on one hand, yeah, we can instruct people saying, yeah, like this really only works if you're using an SDK. But at the same time, if we open this up for beta or GA and someone sees like, oh, you're using snowplow, so I'm just going to go on the snowplow docs and just send what I think is an event, that's fine. But we need to better handle that so it's not just like kind of halting the processing of other events. So I think discarding it is fine, but it's not just a specific issue to the JavaScript SDK. Like I think it has to be something. I don't know if that's something we can add to the overall enrichment process.
No, that actually includes in overall enrichment process.
Okay. Yeah, that would make sense then.
We just had a function which does that.
Yeah. So in that case, I would say I'm fine with discarding events because we know that we should be sending the right fields if they're using our SDK. I'm less concerned, and I'm open to everyone else, or I'm curious what everyone else thinks about this, but I'm less concerned about someone sends us a custom event and it doesn't work, and they're coming to us and say, "Hey, I didn't use your SDK, but it's not working." Well, we can work with them to figure out how to get it working, maybe for their use case, but we really should only be supporting the SDK. I think adding not placeholder data, but like default values for fields that they haven't supplied doesn't seem like the right fix there. So I would say, like, if you're not basically like if you're not using the SDK, then you should, if the events get discarded, that's not really our issue, so to say. Any other thoughts on that?
I share the same opinion in this topic. I also feel like we should discard these events, just probably push them to the bad events queue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one thing worth noting is that right now we had this problem with the STM attribute.
Mm-hmm.
But probably it would be best to find a more holistic approach where
Right.
we make sure that it will not break again because someone misses some other attributes.
Yeah, that's exactly that. So like it sounds like it's good that we can do this in the enrichment process, because I wasn't sure if we'd have to introduce like another event validation process, which would obviously make things a bit more complicated and complex. But yeah, if we can add something in the enrichment process to just put these events into the bad queue, then we at least have a place where we can recognize that there are people that are sending events in this way. But is there a way we can handle that with our existing schema such that like it's not just specific to the STM field? That's an open question to the analytics instrumentation group. Like, I guess, is there a way to Discord events for, I don't know if this just means like we have to validate our schema every time it goes through, but like how do we deal with it so that it deals with like any field that other than just STM?
As far as I know, someone would need to just dive into the specifics of how Snowplow collector and Snowplow enricher works and find this out. I think we don't know the answer to this question right now.
Yeah.
Unless you do.
No. Like I also need to check on that. Yeah.
Cool. No, but that's it sounds like a good lead then as far as like a potential solution there. So I'll check the related issue that Basti's linked, and then I can update that to say, hey, this is the direction I want to head towards, and then we can continue that down that path. I think that's probably the best way to go about it, because and semi-related, you'll see in the production readiness review merge request and that I've linked in the show and tell, there's a bit of a different architecture for what we're trying to do for .com, where we have vector, and because for context, for those that don't know yet, but for ClickHouse that's part of the cluster, there's a table engine called Kafka, which allows ClickHouse to actually pull the events from Kafka. But ClickHouse Cloud does not support that. So we actually have to push events from Kafka to ClickHouse. And so I've introduced another piece into the cluster called Vector, which could potentially do this validation process. But of course, that is like a further downstream process where, it's already gone through the enrichment, the Snowplow enrichment flow. So if we can have a solution in the enrichment process, then I think that'd be the best case scenario there, as opposed to trying to validate it again or discarding events again in a further downstream service. So cool. I'll update the issue there. So thanks for chiming in. And then semi-related is a little bit of the show and tell. If anyone doesn't have anything else, I just wanted to kind of share the readiness review merge request. It's quite an old merge request, but the architecture has changed quite a bit from when we initially used Jitsi and now switched over to Snowplow. I just wanted to call that out for people who haven't seen that yet. There's an updated architecture diagram as well. Just wanted to call attention to that if you're curious about how everything's working there. Open to any feedback or questions also, because it talks about disaster recovery and backing up and like monitoring. If you have any ideas about how we could do that, again, and a few of us, as we've been going through these production incidents, have been discussing, how we could monitor each part of the event pipeline to kind of better have visibility and be more proactive to these types of issues. Open to any ideas there as well. But yeah, Cool. Thanks for the discussion there. But that's the agenda. So if there's nothing else, I mean, well, let me ask it this way. Is there anything that anyone would like to discuss? Cool. There was a follow-up question that I was curious about, related to this potential solution, where I was asking if the service ping event pipeline was susceptible to this. Of course, the architecture is a little bit different since it's going through Lambda and I believe Kinesis. So, but it seems like because data team set that up, Pietro, if you did you want to vocalize that point or?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's more of a question for the data team, because when we enrich Snowplow events, they all land in a S3 data lake, and from there they are picked up to be included in the Snowflake models. So as far as I know, this is not a continuous process, like pushing the events from a stream to ClickHouse. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure how that's done exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's just a thought, because I mean, of course, it's completely different because service ping is not something that we open up for others to. Well, I mean, they can submit it through customers dot, but it's a little bit of a different process, right? In terms of how the data gets handled, like you mentioned. But I was just curious. What another alternative or another potential solution as well is that I mentioned vector processing events. Like maybe it's just a good sign for like us not to use the Kafka table engine, because it seems to just get hung up on one bad event, unless there's a configuration setting to say, hey, if you can't parse this part of the Kafka log after X amount of tries, and you should just move on. But yeah, the good thing is though, is that once you do clear the bad event, the rest go through. So all the events from the past few days should be showing up now. But yeah, all good practice for when customers will be playing with our service. Cool. Then that's the end of the agenda then. So I'll give it another few seconds if anyone wants to talk about anything. Otherwise, everyone gets 17 minutes back. Thanks for joining the call. Have a good rest of your Monday, rest of your week.
Bye.